last video I told you this story about these people at the base of the mountain. And I said, they've been told it's up there. They've gotten their information through, their elders and their elders from their elders and so forth. They can't go in there and look. So do they know that there's gold up there? So now I want to ask this question. So what if it turns out, so we could tell a version of this story where we never actually say if there's gold up here, but we can tell a version of this story where there is gold up there. This is true. There is gold up there. And the question is, if there's gold up there, does it change how you think about whether or not the people at the base of the mountain know there's gold up there? So nothing about them has changed. They still can't go up there and verify. They can't go and ask the originator of this claim that there's gold up there how they know. They can't do that. Everything's the same. They believe there's gold up there. They can't go up there and look, but we just know from some sort of other way that there's gold up there. And your intuitions, they might pull a couple of different ways. And we might have a definition of knowledge. So K here just means knowledge of justified true belief. So knowledge is when we have a justified true belief. We might say JTB. So we have knowledge when we have a belief that is true, and we hold it for the right sorts of reasons. So that's what justified means, right? In some way, we have a warrant, or we have our reasons hanging together in the right way to support us having that belief. And the belief also turns out to be true. We may not actually know if it's true or not, but it just turns out to be true. So if you hold this K equals justified true belief, then you ought to say that the people at the top of the mountain, they don't know in either case, because it's not justified, right? The reasons don't hang together in the right way. You might make that argument. And so, this whole thought experiment, what's it supposed to be talking about is, what does it mean to have good reasons, right? So you might think that because they could just go up there and verify, and the fact that they haven't means that they can't trust the testimony. So generally we think, okay, if somebody tells you something, you can believe them, right? If your parents tell you something, you can believe them. And that's the whole Jimmy Carter example in the reading, right? Do I have a good reason to believe my mother? And generally we think, okay, yeah, you can trust testimony. If we couldn't trust testimony, that makes a lot of knowledge completely inaccessible to us, just due to the sheer physical limitations of verifying every bit of information we possibly could know, right? Where's Paris? Well, Paris is the capital of France, or it's a town in Texas, but this is Paris, France. Paris is the capital of Texas. Okay, what's in Paris? The Eiffel Tower. Have you ever been? No? Well, then you can't believe that, because you're getting that information through testimony, and it's not knowledge, right? That seems sort of a weird story to tell, right? Generally, we think we can trust testimony. But maybe you think because they could just so easily go up there and verify that they can't believe that testimony. But then if you put that up against their other values, well, they can't go up there. Nevertheless, they lack a good reason, right? You might still be pushing this argument, right? So we might think, okay, if we don't have any reason to think that we can't trust testimony, then we should be able to trust testimony, except if it's really easy. We might think if it's really easy to verify and we don't, that we've done something wrong, right? So the question is, what counts as knowledge? What counts as a good reason for something? And ultimately, that's really hard to figure out, because now you might tell me something about a very deeply held religious conviction you have, and I might ask you, well, have you ever gone up the mountain and looked? And then you might say, well, no, I'm not supposed to, or I literally can't. I can't do it. And then I go, well, how do you know? And then you point to something like testimony, right? It's in my religious text, or my elders told me, something like that. And then I might ask you, okay, well then how does that give you justification? All right, let's assume the belief is true. Let's assume you actually hold it as a belief. How do you have the justification? And that's really hard to answer. In this class, we're just going to say whatever a good reason is, it ought to lead you to something true. It ought to be the case that it kind of supports going from an inference to another inference. So your instructor did not get her degree in English, to another inference, right? Whatever licensed this move right here, this move from one inference to another, that is a good reason. So maybe you're onto something. Maybe if you said, well, they don't know there's gold up there. Okay. Well, how do you support that? Well, they could just go and check. You know, maybe they can't go up the mountain, but perhaps they could like fly a drone or a helicopter or something. Does that violate the rules? I mean, they're not looking, and it seems like it would be easy to look. Or maybe it's just like, look, maybe it's just like a different type of knowledge. Maybe we're just saying like some knowledge is the sort of knowledge you can have good reasons for and know, and then some knowledge, some beliefs are just like you take them on faith, right? And so that's a different sort of thing. Whatever your reason is, you ought to be able to put it together in a way that those reasons support the conclusion. And so in this class, I'm going to ask you a lot to say. I'm going to ask you a lot to evaluate. Right? Which means to give me your opinion on something. And then support that. We're going to practice this a lot. And that requires writing, requires thinking. And it's my job to help you learn how to do that well. Because whether or not knowledge is justified true belief, if you can't offer good reasons, why should someone believe you? When you come to the village at the bottom of this hill, and they tell you there's gold up there, but we're not allowed to go up there and look, and it's actually a violation of our sincerely held beliefs to go up there, so if you go up there, we're going to kill you. What should you think? Should you believe them? That there's gold up there? Or should you abstain? Should you withhold judgment? Or should you not believe them? If you tell me, oh, yeah, they know that there's gold up there, you're going to have to give me a good reason. And that's all that's being asked of you here. And what you're being asked to do when you're thinking about this thought experiment is, what are good reasons? Like, how do I go from having a belief to having knowledge? Is there a distinction there that makes sense? Those are the sorts of thoughts that this thought experiment is supposed to help you think about.